Hello, everybody. It is so good to be here with you and with all of you who are watching. My name is Hazel Monae. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the manager of leadership development at the Episcopal City Mission. And I'm going to give Dax a chance to introduce himself and then give a little bit of framing about why we're here on your screen. And then we'll begin our time with our colleague and brilliant friend, William Dickerson. So Dax, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. It is good to be with you. My name is Dax Crocker. I am the lead organizer at Episcopal City Mission. My pronouns are he, him, his.
Perfect. And so Dax and I are really excited to be in this conversation with you, William, who's going to be our teacher for the day. We're really excited. And just a little bit of context. As you all know, we at the Episcopal City Mission are having our annual meeting on September 19th. And part of our annual meeting is a continuation of our Justice Network gatherings, where we've been convening our Episcopal and grassroots constituents together to think about what does it mean to be the church, to be a church about justice, to be a church that's moving that needle a little bit further every day. And that requires some attention and intention. Attention to the world around us and the issues that we all face, and intention to look inward and pay attention to our own growing edges and where we need to develop our own skills and consciousness to be more justice-oriented people as we do the work that God is calling us to do. And so for this conversation, we are so grateful to have with us one of our thought partners and colleagues and friends in this work, William Dickerson, who is going to introduce himself and really give us an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper on some themes of moving the church and moving ourselves towards real liberation and justice. So I'm going to pass it to you, William.
Thank you, family. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Peace to you all. So thank you all so much for having me on here. And my name is William Dickerson. I'm the executive director of Brockton Interfaith Community, which is a faith-based community organizing effort in Brockton, Massachusetts. It is a part of a larger statewide effort that we call MCAN, or Massachusetts Community Action Network. I've been organizing for about 9.5 years, doing lots of work around police accountability and racial justice and mental health and how we create more access to mental health, education, lots of different ways in which I'm oriented to this work and to organizing. And I'm just happy and pleased to be here. The other thing I want to share is that, I'm married with a beautiful baby boy who we call Trace, William Harlan Dickerson III. And we decided we wanted to name him after my father, who I'm also named after. And I want to make sure that folks know that I have a family, and that's part of the reason that I orient myself to this work and why I do this work is because I think that I'm trying to make a better world for our children, and really just trying to make a better world for our families in general.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm here to talk to you all about a framework and kind of like an analogy that we at Brockton Interfaith Community have been operating from. I like to call it an analysis. Some people would call it a metaphor of an analysis. But really want to just like start to get into the nitty gritty around like how we at Brockton Interfaith Community see the world and our analysis about what we perceive as happening to us through a metaphor. And so before we get into that, I just wanted to take a moment for those of y'all that are listening as we're doing this recording, and for you, Hazel and Dax. I just want you to take a minute to think about when I say the word empire. When I say the word empire, what comes to your mind? What are the things that bubble up for you? Just take a second, think of a couple of things.
For me, when I hear empire, I hear unchecked authority. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, similarly, I was thinking about kind of absolute power. Yeah.
Absolute power. Yeah, so that's really powerful. So y'all just went right there. You know, you were right to the nitty gritty of it all, right? Are there like, when you think about it in history, like what are some empires that come to your mind?
I think the one that I hear most about is like the Roman Empire.
The British Empire for me.
Say that one more time.
The British.
Yeah, the British Empire.
British Empire.
Right, so we have like these examples of these empires that come and go and come and go. And as we continue to watch them, they start to reinvent themselves. Each empire is growing off of the empire that came before it. The reason that I asked the question, you know, what do you think about when you think about empire is, you know, in a lot of circles that I'm in, people throw around the word empire a lot. And what I find is when you throw around a word a lot, what ends up happening is that a lot of people have different definitions of what they think about. You know, when you say empire, some people are thinking about it from the perspective of the TV show. I don't know if y'all ever heard of the TV show.
I was just thinking that.
See? Right? Because there's explanations that come along with, yeah, it gives you kind of an idea around what an empire could look like in the context of what I call like microcosms, right? Mini empires. Like people are trying to build music empires. People are trying to build housing empires, construction empires. There's all these different kinds of ways in which you could think about it. And so we put that out there because we want you all to know what we mean when we say empire.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen for a second, just to give you all a definition that we're operating from in relationship to this. Okay. And so, can y'all see the screen?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So our definition of empire comes with principles, 3 major principles that we talk about. So the first principle is that empire is a single government power. Single government power. So sometimes we could think about, sometimes people will go to like, well, what about the UN and all these different kinds of conglomerations or collaborations of countries that are coming together? We don't consider those empire. We would consider like certain power entities in that as being empire influencing larger groups, right? So single power, single government power. The second one that we want to offer up is a broad sphere of influence over many other countries and shapes their like language and their culture, their economics, their politics, and so much more, right? So when you think about the Roman Empire, for example, right? You know, in the beginning of the Roman Empire, they had like remnants of Greece, and so everybody spoke Greek, right? So see the influence of that empire before everybody was speaking Greek, and then you could see as the Roman Empire gets stronger and stronger, how Latin becomes the stronger base of language that people are thinking about, right? And so like there's ways in which that happens. There's ways in which that happens around economics. Like people start to change their economics so that they can keep up with the power entity that exists at that particular time. the taxation of the Romans, right? Romans were taxing people at rates that they had to like find a way to pay. Otherwise, there was going to be severe like consequences for that. And then last but not least is other independent nations need to consult or consider this government power before acting because of their perceived power, right? So this is really important when you think about this in context, because, you know, there are sometimes you have like a conglomeration of groups that come together and operate with their economies in more of a sharing capacity, right? And so when that happens, like, yeah, of course I need to consult with another person if I'm going to make a decision about my own economy, if it's going to impact another group and we've made an agreement. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to have to engage with a conversation about the decisions that I make because something bad could happen to me.
Yeah, I think something that you're pointing to, because I think when we talk about like the historical background of like, okay, people can point to like the Roman Empire and say like, oh, there were so many things that were done wrong. Like, and even, I mean, I know you're about to get to this, but like thinking about how kind of that second point there, the influence over many other countries is shaping their language, their culture, their economics, their politics, that in the Roman Empire, there were really clear violent consequences that you could see and point to that you're like, oh, we don't want to be like that.
Right.
Various iterations of empire, and I know we're about to get to that. And I just want to like foreshadow that, like, when we talk about history, it's not that history is this thing that's stuck back there, but we see the remnants and they are manifest in different ways. And so for all of us, right, those watching and us here in this conversation to be thinking about, when we think of empire, when Dax and I answered, we thought of things from way back when. What would it look like to think about like empire now? So I just wanted to, speak to what you were saying. But yeah, I'm excited. You can see the juices are flowing.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's great. And Dax, is there anything you wanted to share before I keep moving on?
I think just the fact that smaller governments and countries have to consult or are not at liberty to decide their own fate.
Yeah.
There is no total independence to decide who you want to be, how you want to manage your finances or the economy of your own country, or the politics of your own country, right? Because the empire is overlooking.
Yeah. But I think it's important about naming that too, is that sometimes it can have the illusion that they do, right? So in the Greek Empire, a lot of times they would come into a space and then they would like really like bring one of like the officials of that particular country or city, and they would say, all right, you know, you're I'm trying to think of like, so yeah, you're Italian in this particular case, and so we want you to manage this particular area. But it was what we call like a dummy government, right? A government that had to adhere to the empire and didn't have their own decisions, but it made the people feel like they had power. I think that's just important. So the reason that we wanted to bring this definition is, and it's a simplified definition, right? Like we could get so much more, and I'm sure there's so many different things that people wrote down as you all were thinking about this for yourselves at home as well. The reason that we bring this is because we have noticed that if you go across and you look at all the major empires that we would discuss, both in Western and Eastern empires, right? These are the things that really like stand firm and hold true across the board. And so what we want to assert and what we assert in our conversation is that America is an empire. America is an empire. And the reason that we offer this in this particular way, you notice I didn't say the United States. Notice I didn't say that. I said America. And the reason that I say it that way is that it's very clear to me that if I go to anywhere in the world and people ask me where I'm from and I say I'm American, they know where I'm talking about. They're not like, oh, so what, you're Canadian? Or, oh, so what, you're you're from Mexico or Brazil? No. They know I'm talking about the United States. And that's a clear indication of something afoot, because who in the world can claim all the continents? When all these other countries exist. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to speak to this, and I do hope, as Williams invited us to, like, for all of us, right? So just we're learning alongside, and hope that this can be an opportunity for everyone to be engaging. So the invitation is to be answering this question for yourselves as well as you watch. But my sort of gut reaction is it immediately went to all the times I've gone abroad. And William and I are Black, right? So like you would think that like people would assume like, oh, these two are from the continent. And when I say the continent, I mean of Africa, right? But our particular demeanor or whatever personalities that exude Americanness, right, immediately draw people to ask like, where are you from? And they're waiting for me to say America. And if I say somewhere that's not America, there's a surprise, right? And so that kind of what you said, that stronghold on an entire identity, that if I were to even say like, oh, I'm Canadian, there would be like question about that. Like, not like America is United States, and then everyone else that's in the Americas name the particular country they're from in the Americas. So right. My own experience. Yeah, I'd love to hear sort of your experience, Dax, in particular, is really unique, I'm sure. So
yeah, I think I'm thinking about when I was back in school, and some of my classmates wanted to start to address that America term as being wrong. And so they started using North American. And then they would refer to themselves as a North American, this is how I think, without realizing that even that still is wrong, right? Because Mexico is part of North America. Canada is part of North America. And they have distinct ways of thinking and of seeing the world that is not in many ways compared to how a person from the United States see the world. So there's a big influence, even as you try to address how the empire owns terms for itself. And I'm just remembering people wanting to fix that in their vocabulary.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're to this, but so I'm drawn to sort of like the at once this like Americanism, right? Like we are America, so we own everything in the Americas, simultaneously having this like very unique and particular like United States of America exceptionalism that is like, even though we claim all of the Americas, we don't have any relationships with any other parts of the Americas because we're the best right here in the United States. And even when people across the globe think about like the American dream, if you will, it's not the American dream to go live on the shores of Guatemala, right? It's the American dream to the United States. So that is something in particular for us to pay attention to. So yeah, I want to hear sort of your response to that. As you've been working with it, William.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that your statements like just stand on their own, right? And that what I'm trying to provoke in folks is, if you have any inkling or any wrestling around whether or not America is an empire, right? Let's just look at some of the evidence that is placed before us, and are we willing to analyze that? And so this is just one of many examples of what that looks like. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, can we locate a single power government, right? Like, and how that works together. And so it looks like there's a conglomeration of people, right? Because you have like, you have the legislative branch, you have the judicial branch, and you have the executive branch, right? Those things all work on one accord together to like complete a purpose, right? And that we look at that and we even call it the government, right? So the idea of like that it would be separate isn't even the case of like how we even talk about it. We talk about it as the government, right? Do we have a broad sphere of influence over countries? Yes, right?
Really?
Most of the places I go, like there is going to be some kind of accommodations for me to make sure that I can, that I'm able to get around with my language, because I don't speak any other languages, right? So there's some kind of accommodation for like English being put there. Like you can see how our culture influences other cultures, right?
Very much.
We definitely have power over economics in our particular space and across the country, and politics-wise, right? People follow our politics and like keep up with our politics and sometimes model their politics after our own.
So my I have a short time because it's like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, you're speaking the truth. Two things very quickly. One is sort of like, when you talked about language, like, when Americans, United States in this case, go to other countries, they're like, do you speak English? Is like one of the first questions. And we've had this really huge conversation as a nation around it. Immigration in particular, which for some reason has been like really pinpointed as immigration of the Latinx community, which, we can talk about that for a million years. And then when I was growing up, the prompt was always, well, you need to learn to speak English. Even though when we go to other countries, we expect that they speak English so that they can accommodate us, not that we would even pick up 6 or 7 sentences to be able to get around in Indonesia. Instead, we're like, let's go where people speak English in the end, right? And so that's one point. And then the second, I think to this last point you were making about kind of the political nature is how the very things that like we do here and we think are okay in this country that other countries are trying to model themselves after, we like start whole wars in their countries to fix what they're doing there, but they're doing it the same as we do here. And right. Again, just sort of paint this picture. And I do want us, I don't know what more you have about this, but I want us to begin to sort of take these things and start to build this house as you've
exactly
named it.
So that's like perfect segue into, so when we talk about empire and the American empire, we talk about it in the metaphor of a house. And so I'm going to share my screen again to just, kind of put into perspective, like what we mean by this. So when you think about a house, right, there's like 3 major components to a house, right? What are they?
Foundation.
Yep, your foundation.
The pillars or columns.
Yep, columns and walls.
Top, the roof.
Yep, and then you need a roof, right? That makes a complete house. You need all of these particular aspects to make a complete house.
Did you use red, white, and blue on purpose?
No, I didn't. I just noticed.
It's just deep in you. Look at this.
No,
so deep.
Just put a few stars over there on the roof.
Right. So I just want to like just take a minute for folks to just wrestle with, like, in every foundation, there's a foundation. The foundation is the thing that like creates the sturdiness of the house. It's the thing that the house stands on, right? And so I'm like very curious from you all, what like when you think about the foundational pieces of what built this empire, right? What would you say they were? What would you say one is?
I would say that what comes to mind is that in order for you to put the foundation, you have to remove whatever it's there first.
Okay.
And then put your foundation. So you wipe out, you dig and you remove and you get rid of whatever is there, and then you put your foundation.
Yeah. And so what was the thing that was being removed that you're talking about?
Native Americans.
Right. We're talking about whole groups of people that were already here that were wiped out. And what gave people permission to be able to do that?
Well, it was sanctioned by the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Just to discover things.
Right. Right. So when we talk about this this work, and when we talk about like one of the foundational pieces, we talk about it from the perspective of imperial Christianity. Imperial Christianity. So I'm not going to pull these up yet because I don't want to give them all away, but imperial Christianity is one of the ones that we think about as being foundational and that made it possible for the United States to actually be built. You had to have some kind of moral authority that was able to align itself to be able to create that.
Yeah. Can you give, just like, if you were to say to my 3-year-old niece, what is imperial Christianity? What does that mean?
Yeah. So when we talk about imperial Christianity, we're talking about, we're talking about in our particular case. So every empire has a way in which they align themselves with a morality that is religious, like religion. Mm-hmm. The Romans had like lots of gods and things that they were worshiping, and that's one of the ways in which people are governed. In our particular case, it's like this type of Christianity that aligns itself with empire and does the will of the empire. And it creates the moral authority for the empire to do what it does.
Yeah. Right? I think the words that you use are really helpful. Does the will of the empire and not the will of God. Very important differentiation there. Thank you. My 3-year-old niece would understand your definition.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Sounds great. So let's think about some of the other things. What are some of the other things that we think about that built?
Sorry, say that again?
That built our empire. What are some of the other things that built the empire we live in?
Slavery. Free labor.
Yep. Slavery. Yeah. Right? Slavery. And so what are one of the major things that gave slavery permission to exist? What had to be created for that to happen? Like, we're talking about taking all these African people and bringing them over here around a bunch of Christian folks, right? And we had to we had to convince people that it was okay to enslave a group of people indefinitely, perpetually, and hereditarily.
Yeah.
That's racism. That's 100% racism.
Exactly. Racism, right? And so we describe that as white supremacy. Right? And so I'm going to bring up the rest of these because I really want to pay attention to the time, but I wanted us to wrestle with 2 of these and really thinking about how we got there, like how we get to the place that I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
And so the other 2 cornerstones, as we describe them, are patriarchy and capitalism. Patriarchy and capitalism. And so I just want to give so when I talk about white supremacy, I'm talking about like the race of white people, the skin tone of white people being set up as being superior in a sliding scale. And the darker you get, the less power, the less influence, and really the less worthy you are of being a part of the main society, right?
Yeah.
Patriarchy is set up in the kinds of ways that's like speaking about first and foremost, there's a binary around male and female. You are either male or you're female, right? And then there's a hierarchy of what makes you a male and what makes you a female.
Yeah,
all right?
Similar to like race, like the closer you are to whatever the definition of female is, the less value you have, which is where you sort of like can bring in the conversation around like LGBTQ.
Exactly.
Right. I'm also really drawn, you're going to talk about capitalism, and I'm also really drawn to like how even when we talk about like enslavement, the intersections of white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, and imperial Christianity on that one entity. So for folks to be thinking about, these are kind of both standalone and intersecting pillars. They're not like, if I just talk about patriarchy, we're going to be all set. Debunk that myth right now, please.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I think the other thing to notice is that all of them, the 4 foundational pieces, are threaded together by religion, right? Especially Christianity in the case of the foundation that we're talking about, right? From the beginning of the Christian religion, white, bright, sun, anything that is clear is compared to holiness, to being saint, to being good, right? And anything that is dark, obscure, night, evening, etc., is bad. Is bad. So white supremacy has its roots in how even the Bible says that if your sins are cleansed, they will be white, right? You will be white when you are cleansed of your sins, right? But if you're not, then there's a spot, there is darkness, there is sin in you. Mm-hmm. Patriarchy is based on the Bible, right? The man is the head of the house. Capitalism as well is based on certain portions of the Bible that he who has more will be given more. He who has less will be even taken whatever little he has. And then obviously Christianity as being the true religion. All those foundational pieces are put together by religion.
Mm. Yeah. And it's just important to recognize that you can go in that route. You could also go in the route of white supremacy is the thing that threads all these together. You can actually do this with all of these acts. And this is why I think I really am really pushing us around thinking about these as cornerstones that actually, if you dismantle one, you don't dismantle the house.
Right.
Right? That we actually have to address it all. And we have to think about what does it mean to address it all. And when the way we talk about it, we have to be able to address them all and recognize how they work in tandem with one another.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're saying, and I'm really, that we could, again, talk about this forever. And I really want to make sure in our time that we have left that we can get to something that folks can take away. But what you're saying is really important because for me, when I look at these four, I'm like, okay, Hazel, in one person, I can do as much as I can in all four of these pillars. And maybe there's one in my particular life where I really want to put energy. And so what that means then as a person is that I have to be in relationship with other people who are working to dismantle other parts of these pillars because, again, it's not just do one and all the rest will be okay. It's we actually have to work together to get rid of, really uproot this foundation. I will always want to talk about an abolitionist framework, but we can talk about what you want to talk about right now. So
I just want to get, the last thing is about, I just want to make sure that we're grounded in the idea of how capitalism works. And I'm really talking about it just from the perspective of the binary, right? That it's about rich and poor. Mm-hmm. Argument of rich and poor, and that there's all kinds of ideologies around capitalism is the closer you get to rich, right, the more accepted you are by capitalism. It's oh, you're doing it right. So all of these things, the thing that I'm hoping that people are noticing is that they all are set up in a binary fashion with a hierarchical setup so that some people can be accepted into the in crowd and that there's always an out crowd. Some people can be accepted into the in crowd when it is expedient for empire, and there are always people that will be in the out crowd. That's part of what keeps it going. All right. Okay. So I just want to just say, I'm going to do these quickly, right? So when you think about the walls and the structure, we talk about structural oppression, right? This foundation actually influences things like media, education, economy, the penal system, nonprofit industrial complex. So that's all the nonprofits, right? Politics, military, religion, and family, right? Family is huge. Mm. So when we talk about all of these structures, all of these systems and institutions that have been created, they've been created through the lens of our foundation.
Yeah.
Through the lens of our foundation. And, oftentimes people ask me the question, well, first and foremost, we focus on, in our organizing and the work that we do, we focus on making these better, the walls.
The walls, yeah.
You talk to just about any organizer and organization, the work that they're doing is how do we make education less racist, less patriarchal, right? How do we focus on economy? How do we make that less racist, less patriarchal, less capitalist, less imperially Christian, right?
Can I say like an example, like, or something that I feel connected to it? So I watch a lot of baking and cooking shows. Mm-hmm. And one, actually last week when I was watching the Great British Bake Off, one of the judges said, you know, I wanted you to cut these up a little bit more, that they were like raisins or craisins or something, so that they can actually like blend well into the bread. When they're big like this, I can taste them and I can see them and I don't want them in there. And so that to me is like the metaphor of like how patriarchy and capitalism, imperial Christianity and white supremacy gets chopped up so finely so that it gets baked into our systems, and so that you don't actually even see it as much, right? It's not as in your face. And so for me, even this morning when I went to go look at, my friend was just on a blog and I was like, oh, let me take a look at his organization. I said, let me look at who the leaders are. Literally 10 people in leadership, all white men, one white woman. He's Black. And so like, even just that, oh, that's not a thing. There's a woman there. Or those are all guys who worked so hard. Like, but that kind of mentality just got baked into the organization. So even as they were hiring, they didn't even think like, oh, we've just hired another white man for this senior level position, right? And so again, like part of it is paying attention to like, you have to pay attention a lot harder because it is chopped up and baked in very beautifully. So you don't even like know that it's there.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a really powerful analogy. I'm gonna use that.
You better watch some Great British Bake Off. It'll teach you some things.
So the last thing I want to say about this house that I think is just important is oftentimes I hear people asking, well, why haven't I seen this? Why couldn't I see the foundation in the ways in which you're describing it? And then some people were like, yeah, I see this. I just couldn't articulate it in this kind of way. And some people are like, yep, this is exactly how I'd articulate it, right? One of the things that every good house should have is a roof, because the roof helps to protect the house from the elements. In our particular case, the elements are the naysayers of the house, right? The storm of the house is like, why that like people will say things like, that house is bad. It's like it's hurting people. And so the roof acts as a covering for the house. And so a part of the ways in that works, and we talk about it as ideologies, is like when I ask many people, what are the foundations of the house? They'll say things like freedom, right? Democracy, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all these different kinds of things. And for example, the ideology of freedom of religion, we know that wasn't true, right? Because when one of the things that that the doctrine of discovery did, right? The doctrine of discovery is the Catholic Church issued this doctrine that like gave any group that was going out in search of land or in search of places, gave them complete power to convert. And if they would not convert, it gave them power to kill them and take their land. From the very beginning, when Christopher Columbus and all of them came over here, they had that mandate. Yep. So we know that they didn't actually believe in freedom of religion. They wanted everybody to be Christian, and particularly a type of Christian. And
Paul, we look at our own biblical text. Paul, the same thing as the mandate, much different, but similar in even our own tradition. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So I just wanted to give that as an example, and that like some of these other ideologies that sit here around these kinds of things, around every man is created equal, right? Was a lie, because slavery made it very clear that every human being in general wasn't created equal, and we knew that we weren't including women in that conversation because they were not able to vote or have any say over the destiny of their own lives.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to is really helpful, right? So like if we cover this really terrible house, right, with the ideology that this is really about freedom and liberation and democracy, then what happens is if someone like me says like, this house is garbage, bulldoze it over, the ideology that is then upheld is that like, I'm not American and I don't believe in freedom and I just, then it's like, I sort of am seen as the bad person when really I'm speaking to something that is the truth, right? The truth of what does it mean to be free and liberated is to remove these pillars, to remove the foundation. And so I want to, in our last little bit of time, sort of have you help us see then, like, what then is the role of the church? Like, if this is, if you see their religion and our families and all the things that we participate in day-to-day life are a part of this foundation, are upheld and covered by these ideologies that actually harm us and harm everyone. And for some people, it's not conscious, right? We don't wake up every day and say, I'm going to go out there and be a racist. It just happens, right? And so for folks who are watching, I would love for you to just sort of share with us, what do you see? Your work with the Faith-Based Community Organizing Initiative, what do you see as the work of the church to begin to look at this house and then dismantle it? Maybe a few words about that before we move on, and then I'll give Dax the last word after that.
All right, so what I would say about this is, like, I think that so part of the reason that we're in the mess that we're in is because, like, the church isn't doing what it's supposed to do in a lot of ways. So if we were able to, like, go back to the heart of what particularly the Christian faith was supposed to be, and I'm talking like pre-Constantine, right? The church itself was a liberatory church. It was like steeped in liberation, right? And so I would really encourage people and really push people around thinking, what does your faith have to say about people whose backs are up against a wall, right?
Come on, Howard Thurman.
Yep, exactly, right? So it's about being able to then go back to our scriptures and go back to the ways in which we operate and saying, what does our faith have to say? And are we carrying that out? And where is it that we're putting oppression on people, right? And it's simple things with imperial Christianity. Christians, we do not track any other calendar except for ours, right? And so there are groups of people that the reason I can't, be with folks on Saturday is because there are whole groups of people coming from different walks of life that don't worship, or that worship on Saturday, Friday night to Saturday night, and call it the Sabbath, call it their holy day, right? And so are we keeping track of our calendar and how our calendar, our Christian calendar, influences the greater empire's calendar, and vice versa, how we're influenced by it? And are we tracking how we don't become an oppressive entity, from those perspectives? How have we embraced capitalism in our context? What are the ways in which we continue to keep the oppression of peoples based around their sex and gender, right? And how we dictate what that's supposed to look like? And are we really, really willing to look at racism? And are we really, really looking to identify our part in the playing out of racism?
Teach us.
I'm that's all I can give you. I mean, 30 minutes in, I'm oh my goodness.
Yeah, what a treat, really. Dax?
Yeah, I was thinking about the phrase that a lot of people use when they say, what's the difference between an ideologue and a pragmatist, right? An ideologue is someone who doesn't have room for anyone else. This is how it is. And there is no flexibility. And obviously a pragmatist is more of a salamander, or someone who can adapt to different situations to survive. And I think William nailed it when he said, what is the role of the church? What was the church birthed for? And how do we go back to it, right? And the role of the church in the beginning was to be an alternative system, an alternative way to defend those on the margins from the Roman Empire. It was not supposed to become part of the empire and then become the empire itself.
Right. Yeah.
And so when we talk about ideologies, for me, it's these understandings of the Bible that legitimize white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, imperial Christianity, that don't have room to defend people on the margin, right?
Or even don't have room to do what you, Dax, and you, William, are asking, is just to say, where do I need to pay attention? Where have I upheld these things? And not as a place of shame or guilt, but to say, I want to be in alignment with what God is calling us to do and be. And if I find a place where that's not happening, let me adjust. And I really hope that that's what folks are getting out of this conversation. I know it can be a lot of terms and a lot of new concepts. And the invitation is to watch it as many times as you'd like. Really think through some of the things that came up for you and pay attention to, I felt really tense in my chest when, William, pushed me in that way. Or I feel really, challenged. I feel as a part of ECM staff, Hazel, myself, challenged that we're hosting an event, very excited to have the event, but hosting an event on a day in which not just one of our colleagues can't be there, but we might have been able to invite more folks, but we're hosting an event on Rosh Hashanah, right? So even just thinking and naming for ourselves, right? This isn't to be like, oh, we have it together, but to name for ourselves, we too have work to do. So that is always an invitation. The work is ongoing. And so part of the way that we know that we can continue to do the work is to stay in relationship. And so we're grateful for this relationship with you, William. We're grateful for our continued partnership and friendship, Dax, and for all of you who continue to be a part of this network, continue to be a part of this work of building the world and the church that we know God dreams for us. And so thanks so much for joining us and being a part of this conversation. We cannot wait to dive a little bit deeper with you on Saturday, September 19th at our annual meeting, where we think together about what does it look like for the church and for us as individuals to dismantle this house so that we can get and stay free. So thank you so much, and we will be seeing you all really soon. All right, take care, everyone.
Peace, everyone.
Okay.